There are still so many people out there that have no idea that viewing the wrong types of light at the wrong time of day impacts your health on a cellular level. We're talking obesity, cancer, infertility, diabetes. All these metabolic disorders have a heavy correlation to the wrong types of light at the wrong time of day. Now, me saying this is one thing, but today I have a highly qualified person to say this. Dr. Martin Moore-Ede, also known as the Light Doctor, is here to talk about this. We're going to give you some actionable real life stuff that you can do to prevent these disorders for yourself and your family members. We're going to talk about his brand new book, which is a perfect thing that has all of this research gathered together into one place in case you still need to convince that friend or family member of this science. He's put it all together, and there is so much in this episode that I think is going to be valuable to so many people. So if you are enjoying this information, if you want to help spread this message about health and light, please make sure to share this episode with a friend or a family member. If you're on YouTube, leave it a like, leave it a comment. On Apple or Spotify, leave the show up to a 5-star review. Let's continue to spread this information about health and light. And today's episode is really going to give you a lot of fantastic information to enable you to spread the good word. Let's get into it. Today's show is brought to you by Upgraded Formulas. They have my absolute favorite magnesium. You can get the best and only clinically studied stabilized nano magnesium supplement on the market from Upgraded Formulas using my code YOGI for 10% off. Did you know that magnesium is actually required for over 800 enzymatic reactions in the body? This clinically studied magnesium has proven to improve sleep quality and energy by over 60%, specifically improving light sleep measurement by 90%, REM sleep by 150%, and deep sleep by 250%. That means more energy, better mood, and deeper sleep. Who doesn't want that? What makes this the best on the market? This specific magnesium is nano magnesium, which means it is easier for your body to absorb and use. In fact, it is absorbed up to 99.99%, which means you'll feel the results instantaneously. A lot of people are quick to talk about the benefits of sunlight, but what gets often missed in the conversation is the benefit of darkness and the importance of protecting yourself from blue and green light after sunset. That is why I choose Viva Rays as my go-to source for protecting my circadian rhythms. You can use the code YOGI to save 15% off at Viva Rays. Now, you may have seen some of these studies popping up. I call them fear mongering about blue blockers not being effective. And that is a partial truth, because when you use blue blockers that are clear or that have not been tested with a spectrometer to actually block what they say they do, they will not protect your circadian rhythms. And they are not catching those key wavelengths that you need to be blocking in order for your body to be able to repair, for you to make melatonin, which is a master antioxidant. And artificial light at night has been in the scientific literature extensively linked to a host of hormonal cancers, obesity, diabetes, and all sorts of metabolic issues. That, again, is why I choose Viva Rays as my go-to source for protecting my circadian rhythms to allow my body to get adequate darkness at night. You can use the code YOGI to save 15% over at Viva Rays, and you can actually trust that they block the frequencies of light that they say they do. Thanks to Viva Rays for sponsoring today's podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited to have today's guest. He's actually a returning guest, Dr. Martin Moore-Ede. Thank you so much for being here today.
Delighted to join you again, Sarah. We had a great conversation last year and look forward to catching up. And there's a lot going on in the area of healthy lighting that I think your viewers are going to appreciate.
I think so too. And, as we kind of chatted about before I turned on the camera to record, that I love talking about health and light. It's like probably my most favorite topic ever because it's just so fascinating. And then you see the impact clinically that it has on people. And it's really astounding. But people are going to listen to someone like you over me because you have really worked very hard in the education piece and the credentialing, and you have quite a background. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that before we dive into some of these topics on health and light for people.
Well, in a way, I mean, you never see your career, going forwards. But the way the path has happened is it started out with me being trained in medicine, being a surgical resident, working those very long shifts, 36-hour shifts in front of, under, at that time, bright fluorescent light, blue-rich fluorescent light, 24/7. Operating in a and functioning in impaired state because of that work schedule and sleep schedule and light exposure, making mistakes in the operating room, writing prescriptions I couldn't make a sense of, and so forth. And that led me to Harvard to do a PhD. I took a detour out of surgery. And the PhD was to look at this very new area of circadian clocks. Really, before I started my training, there were about 3 papers a year in this field. There are now thousands. Just to give you a sense of it.
Yeah.
In fact, I was warned off this field as being really not something to pursue. It was, sort of a career-ending idea. But I pursued it, and along the way, after my PhD, I joined the Harvard Medical School faculty as a professor and built a lab there, and we had some great time with some really first-rate people. I was able to recruit a brilliant team. We discovered where located the human clock in the human brain. It had been found before just in rats and hamsters and some other species. We found where it was in humans. We showed that humans were synchronized by light, and we showed that the disruptive effects of light at that time, leading to all sorts of impairments in function and mood and performance. And, I went off my career to apply some of this out in the world with a consulting firm. We work with over half the Fortune 500, a consulting firm called Circadian, appropriately named from the field. And along the way, around the year 2000, some new discoveries started coming through that were things I didn't anticipate from my prior work. One was that there were blue receptors in the eyes, photopigment in the eyes that detected blue light. That blue light was more important in synchronizing circadian rhythms than white light in general. And also the medical side of it, evidence of increased risk of cancers, particularly breast cancer in women, was the first to really be clarified as a result of being exposed to light at night. Now, that can be light working night shifts, like nurses or others working night shifts, overnight shifts, but it can also be people who leave the lights on in the bedroom at night, and an awful lot of people do that because of anxiety and concerns, and we'll come back to that. That's a big no-no because of the health impact of it. And that research got to the point that all the people I was working with in industry said, Martin, we can't switch off our lights at night. We can't stop working at night. We're running oil refineries, railroads, airlines, energy companies, you name it. We can't switch anything off. So what can we do about this? Because we've got a big cancer risk and so forth. 50% greater risk of breast cancer in women working the night shift. And the World Health Organization came out in 2007 with that light was a carcinogen.
Right?
So that led us then to say, okay, what could we do about it? And that led me back into the lab again to look at this issue. And we were able to define that there was actually quite a narrow band of blue light that is causing the problem. It's 25 times more potent than any other part of the light spectrum. And we were therefore said, okay, then let's see whether we can build lights that have no blue in it if we use nighttime hours. And we developed lights that did that, and then brought them out in industry, but did a lot of research on them. They've been out there for 5 years or more, but also research in the lab and showed very significant impacts on health. And so basically, I then realized we got something that was really critical. $150 billion of lights sold in the world every year. That's a huge industry by any measure. Virtually all of them, 99 point something percent of them, are these blue-rich LEDs that are causing a problem. So I licensed the technology out to some major lighting companies. And, the other side of the equation is, of course, consumers needing to know about it and ask for it. People like your viewership, health conscious, people who are conscious about their health. They may not be scientists or anything, but they want to know what is best for themselves and their family. And those people deserve to know. And if we can create a demand and awareness, and that in turn has led me to write my new book, The Light Doctor, subtitled Using Light to Boost Health, Improve Sleep, and Live Longer. And we can get to living longer, because that's a fascinating thing. People live years longer when they're not exposed to the wrong light at night.
Mm. Yeah, I love all of this because, like I said, this is probably my favorite topic to talk about because it gets monotonous to talk about food all of the time. And I'm sure that you've seen in your research that this type of blue light that you're talking about, it actually is capable of raising cortisol and insulin completely in the absence of food. And I think when people can kind of have that quote unquote light bulb moment, they see, maybe that the environment that I'm in is really contributing to issues that I'm having with appetite, with sleep, with hormones, with all of these things that are, people are so concerned about these days with their health, but they just kind of can't, like you mentioned, there's thousands of studies available. They kind of can't wrap their brains around it, would you say?
Right, absolutely, because delve into the science and it is immensely confusing. You've got to read a lot of it before you can digest it and realize what is solid in that science. So any one paper can get published and sort of get people confused. But the answer is to put it all together. There've been over 20,000 papers since 2000. In the last dozen years, at least 10,000 scientific peer-reviewed studies. I'm saying they've been through all the formal tests, but they show, as you mentioned with appetite, appetite is increased when you are exposed to blue light. And just to be quite clear, people think of light, well, it's not blue light that looks blue necessarily.
Right.
It's light that actually is white light, but white light has all the colors of the rainbow in it. It's an optical illusion, white light. It's actually made of what comes in through your eyes is violet, blue, green, yellow, orange, red, all those wavelengths coming in, and the brain puts it all together and interprets it as white. But if there's blue in that spectrum at night, people get more hungry. And so we studied this, and we've had lots of studies now. People who are working at night eat twice as many snacks on the night shift if they got blue light. People who are exposed to blue light have this, appetite, this hunger that's created by the blue light, more trips to the fridge, etc. So therefore it contributes to weight gain. It also contributes, as you mentioned, to a disruption of diabetic, like pre-diabetes disruption of our glucose metabolism. So, normally the body uses, when you eat foods that contain sugars, the glucose level in the blood goes up, and insulin rises, is released to damp it down again. Well, in this case, they're much less sensitive to the insulin. So the glucose levels rise higher, the more insulin has to be pumped out. It's called a state of, insulin resistance, which is a sort of diabetic type state. And you can create that in just, one night of being, sleeping in a room with the lights on, or working with a room with the lights on. And we talk about sleeping with the lights on. It's amazing. 30–40% of people, over 50% of elderly people are sleeping with the lights on, and it has a huge impact on their metabolism, their weight gain, double the risk of diabetes, double the risk of heart disease, mental disorders, anxiety, depression are all linked to it.
Cancers. Yeah.
Lifespan is linked to it. So people who sleep in the dark at night live longer than people who have the lights on at night.
Yeah.
So it's a huge body of information and some very huge studies that have shown that now.
Yeah. It's really astounding when you look at that research. I mean, it's pretty unrefutable, but I think a lot of people just don't they can't really grasp it. And there's so many people that come to me and their husband or a family member wants to sleep with the TV on at night. They're opposed to using blackout curtains. It's, kind of a sad fact about this house that we live in now. We're in the middle of the city. We're surrounded by other homes and other people. There's light pollution everywhere. And the first thing I did before we even moved in was do these like double blackout curtains over all the bedrooms. I think the bedrooms are the most crucial because you can wear blue blockers around the rest of the house. But I found out the former owner that lived here, actually one of the reasons why she left is she got cancer. And I'm not trying to say that that's the number one thing. I think there are definitely other factors involved. But when I was trying to, if you try to sleep in the bedroom where I sleep and the blackout curtains are open, I can't. Like there's so much light coming in from outdoors. And then the research is there. It's unrefutable about the link between certain cancers and the blue light at night.
Right.
Correct? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The links are any one case, you can never exactly know what the factors are. But
Exactly.
when you
There's
look at
always
them all
extra.
together in large scale studies, you can see very large increases in risk. As I said, it can be 20, 50%, even more in some cases, increase in risk.
Yeah.
So, and the most striking differences are, women who do not see light, never see electric light. Well, who are they? Well, there are people who are
Amish.
blind since an early
Yeah.
age, or people who live in parts of the world with no electricity yet,
Hmm.
have very low rates, a very rare disease.
Interesting.
It was a very rare disease back in the 1800s,
Mm.
before electric light came along. And breast cancer was not common at all.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's
Now
so
it's
ramped
very
up
common.
now that
Yeah.
basically those people living in countries like in Western Europe or the eastern part of the US that are intensely electrified, um, living in cities and the like, they have rates that 100, 120 women per 100,000 get breast cancer each year,
Hmm.
as opposed to only 20. In other words, 5 times more, 6 times more. Only 20 of those 100,000 women will get cancer if they're not seeing electric light for one reason or another.
Yeah.
So that's a big effect. The other thing is with the increased introduction of LEDs, and again, this is a correlation so far, but it is pretty alarming. You can see there's been a steady ramp up of the amount of the cancer rates in young people. And then
Yes.
about 2016, the rate just accelerated and it's been accelerating. Um, and that was coincidence with the introduction of blue-rich LED lights. LED,
Mm.
we didn't have any LED lights until about 2013 or 14, and they really took off in 2015, 16. Now they're 90% of lights. Um, but with that introduction, we suddenly see a steep climb in cancers in young people, and that's been in the news. So I'm not saying that Princess Kate's cancer was due to looking at her screens at night, editing her photographs or whatever she did. But but you can't link it to one case. But
Right.
certainly the evidence is there, and the same for colon rectal cancers and
Oh
prostate
yeah.
cancers and so forth in men.
Yeah.
Um, so these cancers are much more becoming much more, and I think it's been ignored.
Oh
The
yeah.
other thing
And I mean,
is,
we've
I
also
thought
got these little computers that we put in our faces all the time that are just completely rich with the blue
that's
light that
that's right, that's
the
right.
children are my
Yeah,
son
we
is
do that.
20 months now and he kind of is looking at us with my husband and I and it's a shiny object. He wants it. I'm like, no, 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 no. No, we can't do that. But we try to put all of our phone screens so they are red.
Yeah, right.
But that's still not going to block out 100% of the issue,
That's
so
right. Well, I mean, there are little things you can do, and basically you've got to look at all the sources of light. So, where it's going now is we can build LED lights that have no blue in them. We can build LED screens that have no blue in them,
mhm.
and that's a new thing. But as I say, most people are pretty unaware of this.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
part of this is spreading the word, just like you're doing, and spreading the word. And one of the ideas I had about the book is it could be quite useful as something to give your boss if you want to get the proper lights in your workplace, or
I think
something to
my
give your
listeners
family members.
are wives and husbands, because my husband finally now is on board, but it took about 4 years where he understands we don't turn the big lights on. And if we need to get around, we try to use the red bulbs. And, but it took him 4 years. And I think that's the number one thing for maybe my listeners is majority female. And if you're a male listening, thank you for being here. Don't leave. Uh, but so many of my female community, they are trying to find some empirical data to show their spouse, or their parents, their elderly parents. And so this is why I was so excited to bring you back on, because you do have a book that empirically shows this, and like we've kind of qualified in the conversation, you have the credentials, you've literally done the groundbreaking research on this topic. So there's nobody, I think, better qualified to talk about this than you.
Yeah, well, as I say, it's a question of trying to get it into a manageable state. So the idea is the book's written for not for scientists, but for people, non-scientists, but are concerned about health. It's written with, I've got a large number of color pictures in it, because you've got to talk about light and the colors and light and everything else. So it's people like diagrams, they can flip through the diagrams and get the message. But a lot of it is really just condensing down this research. And I also do give references to everything at the back. In other words, it's not an academic book, but if you say, well, is that really true? There's a reference, and you can actually dig in and find the papers that are and that get into the literature. So yeah, it's got that. But the whole idea is to try to educate people and try to get this word out. And it's really a mission at this point in time. It's a bit of a campaign we need, because the regulators now are ramping up the lumens per watt requirements for LED lights.
Wow.
Lumens is a measure of brightness, not of health, measure of brightness. And watt is, of course, a measurement of electricity. So how much bright, cheap light can you create with a bulb is the key issue. And the trouble is, those lights are quite often very unhealthy. But they put no allowance of that. So it's a bit of a campaign we need to educate not only, our spouses and not only our colleagues and bosses, but also educate the people and, regulators and others. And we need to get, and that's, the mission now is to build that awareness, because the technology is available. One of the challenges was last year when I spoke with you, we didn't have, we had a rather limited number of solutions actually available. We've now got new solutions that are out there now, and the book points to where you can find them. So there's a lot of lights coming on board that people can buy that can help them solve these problems.
I love it. Yeah, that's whenever I talk about this topic, the first question that people say, well, what kind of light bulbs can I buy? And I'm the wrong person to ask, because if you come to my house after dark, it's like the 1800s. Like it's just dark. We've got all the lights from the city that come into the windows. So that, to me, that's even too much. But we don't have tons of light bulbs. We have like little red light panels that I'll turn on just to so I don't fall, but we just keep everything as dark as we can, use candles, things like that. But not everyone has a family that is on board to necessarily do that. And so, like you mentioned, you do have some lighting options for people if they are looking to kind of revamp their home lighting, correct?
Absolutely. And it's not all red and dark and dim, right? In other words, they're now by understanding, and this is what we're able to do, which precise wavelengths, which precise colors in light do we need to remove, we can actually build lights that look relatively white in nature, right? Relatively normal in nature, that you can do your homework with, kids can do their homework with, or you can do a project with and have good visibility without having the ill effects, because we don't have to remove all light. We just have to really remove this part of the blue spectrum. So those lights are available, and they work quite dramatically in terms of reversing these problems.
Wonderful. Well, I'll definitely have all those links down in the show notes for people so they can check those out. I'd love to kind of jump back into, because we were again talking before I turned on the record, just a little bit more about some of the other health implications that people might deal with when they are like I said, the lady in my messages, she said, I've been the only thing I've changed is I've been staying up kind of watching reels on Instagram every night. And now I have like this jaw tension and I'm having trouble sleeping. Um, maybe we can talk a little bit
Yeah.
about how.
Well, there are two ingredients there, aren't there? Because it is blue light, but it's not just blue light. In other words, the mere fact of looking at, worst case is watch a horror movie late in the evenings, right? You're getting the blue light, but you've also getting your brain whirring, or so it's also that side of it too. So to be quite clear. And the other thing is, there's some debate about what the effect of blue light from screens is. And that usually relates to, is there an instant effect? In other words, if I just take my one night, I just don't use them, will suddenly my sleep be better? No, the answer is no, because sleep has got a lot of rhythmic power to it, a lot of inertia, as you might say. In other words, because they're different parts of what makes you sleepy. One is the circadian part, the circadian clock, timing in and saying it's now time for bed. But the other is just the length of time you've been awake, and you build up a sleepiness the longer you're awake. So, if you're up late and you've got that sleepiness component also driving you as well, that's not the circadian clock. So just changing that. However, very clearly, if you avoid blue light in the evenings, i.e. by using screens that are blocked or using blue blocking eyewear that removes the correct blue, or and at the same time, you make sure you see blue rich light in the morning, in the early morning hours. That could be going outside, very best way to do it.
Yes.
Get exposed to daylight, but also, you can do it with tablets that produce, or screens that produce blue rich light in the mornings. If you do both of those, you have a big effect. And, there's a fascinating study coming out of Harvard's McLean Hospital, where they looked at kids in a school, and they were able to show that math scores were improved by just that simple thing of blocking the blue, preventing the blue in the evenings, adding blue in the mornings, and lo and behold, the math scores of these kids went up. And they could also, they scanned their brains and showed all sorts of connections were enhanced in the brain. So it wasn't just a random thing about math scores. There was sort of really quite considerable effects. So yes, and the extreme case is the people who go out hiking into the wilderness, and if you don't bring any electric devices with you, no screens, no lamps, no flashlights, you rely on, what our ancestors have. You maybe have a wood fire or candles. They have no blue in them, by the way.
Yep.
Those people suddenly sleep so much better, feel much better, much more alert during the day. And that's an effect of just getting a very robust, exposure to light during the day, like our ancestors always did, and pitch dark or near pitch dark at night. That is, that's really critical. But we just live in a constant state of twilight in our normal worlds.
It's true.
What with the light coming in through the windows and the electric lights and the screens, producing light way brighter than moonlight or starlight ever was. And in the daytime, we spend more time, 90% of our time indoors. And, we're exposed to twilight, very relatively dim levels of light indoors compared to how bright it is outside. So, yeah, I know the evidence. And it's, mental health. It's in your immune system, how well you're able to counteract the effects of viruses and other things. Your natural immunity is impacted. It impacts your blood pressure is changed. Your heart disease is prevented. There's just a long list of things that are addressed. by making sure you get the right light at the right time, basically, is the motto.
Yeah, exactly. And I haven't had Zimmerman on my show. I'm sure you're familiar with Scott Zimmerman and
Yeah.
some of his work on red and near infrared, but I think that's an important component in all of this too, with being outdoors and how impactful that is for people. Because when we're indoors, especially if we're only around the LEDs and we are kind of behind windows, our windows are energy efficient as well to block out the
Right.
infrared light, because if infrared got through the windows, our homes would be overheated. And so I think that can be an important component that's missing for people as well. That's, we know what infrared does to the mitochondria and helps it produce the subcellular melatonin. And I think melatonin is the missing piece that I don't know about your thoughts on this, but the reason why the cancers and all these diseases, the metabolic diseases, are so high with the blue light at night is because it essentially blocks melatonin production. And it's such a
Yeah.
powerful antioxidant that most people are, going to be
Right. It's a
deficient
huge,
in.
it has a very clear effects and a lot of very clear studies showing that when melatonin levels are high, it's a very strong cancer suppressor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's been shown in animal studies using humans as well.
Yeah.
It's also shown that, if you suppress melatonin with light, cancer cells and tumors grow,
Mm-hmm.
twice or three times faster.
Wow.
So yeah, no, it's a big effect, and it's part of, it's so simple, compared to some of the, it's an environmental health problem, but
Mhm.
you think about trying to deal with PFAS chemicals, the forever chemicals, or other toxins or microplastics or whatever you're thinking about, they're big, big problems to deal with.
Mhm.
This one is pretty simple, just
Yeah.
change the darn light bulb.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is not that hard. And
Yeah.
yet, so it's the most available thing we can do to improve health in the short and long term.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about this just light coming in the bedroom at night. I think that's confusing to people. Like, if someone's sleeping, but there's a light on, but they're sleeping, then how could that possibly negatively impact them? Let's take the example of, a spouse who demands that the TV be on at night, and they're like, but I'm sleeping during that time, so I'm getting my sleep. Um, how does that impact someone
Yeah,
on
well,
that level?
separating out the effects of sleep and light is a little complicated, actually, because a lot of the research where people are kept awake to see what the effects of having too little sleep, they
Mm-hmm.
keep them awake by having the lights on. So
Mm-hmm.
you've got to say, okay, which is which? But yes, no, light is coming in through the eyes even when you're asleep. Now, if you wear a blindfold, that
Mm-hmm.
does fix the problem.
Oh,
So
okay.
and therefore the most obvious answer is have the spouse who wants to sleep put a blindfold on, and then you solve the problem for them,
Mm-hmm.
because people do have different biological clocks. Some people are morning types naturally, get up early in the morning. I get up at 5 o'clock every morning. My wife doesn't. um, I'm the one who goes to bed earlier than my wife. So those sort of things are part of our nature. Interestingly, it's why people are different, why some people are late night people, why some people are morning people, relates to how sensitive they are to light in the evenings.
Mm. I
So
think that people are some people are more sensitive to light in the evenings.
yes.
I'm wondering though, like with the chronotypes, because that's kind of a popular conversation these days. I've talked with a few of my colleagues about this. I wonder how many people that class themselves as night owls, though, are just simply keeping the lights on, keeping these
Well, it
blue,
interacts. Yeah. If you take those people, go back to those camping
them
experiments, going
camping.
into the wilderness. There had people in these. There were people in these studies. A lot of people in these studies who were morning types, and some were evening types. And
Mhm.
lo and behold, they all ended up sleeping on the same schedule
When you
when
put
the
them
natural
camping.
light was there, which tells you something. And so, yes, we see big differences in how much melatonin is suppressed in
Mhm.
one person versus another.
Yeah,
Um,
I know you've done the research on the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and I feel like that is the primary uh like signal, right, for our sleep wake cycles, rather than this kind of like, I'm a chronotype dolphin or bear, or what, I don't even know all the chronotypes, but I'm always like, yeah, but what does your nighttime environment look like? Because if they were all to go camping, maybe there would be a small, like a 2% of people that wouldn't sleep because of the people that might have been watching the tribe, to make sure no danger ensued on the tribe. Maybe there were those very small percentage of people that had that biological ingrainment. But some of this chronotype research is saying like, oh, 30% of people are this. And I'm like, are they controlling for light in those studies is my big
No.
question. You would know better than I would.
Well, I think a lot of it is to do with differences in light sensitivity, right? So there
Mm,
are natural patterns of people. Some people's clocks run faster than others naturally when there are
mm,
no time cues. Those studies where you take away all time cues, no knowledge of time of day, no light dark cycle. And some people's clocks run, a few people's clocks run shorter than 24 hours. Some run longer than 24 hours. Most run longer. Some run longer than others. So there is a difference there. Naturally, and that's not light because you remove the light out of the equation. But
mm,
certainly their interaction with light can be quite big. And so you can control a lot of this by making sure that we get as close to the normal light. So the lights we have will sort of follow the natural cycle. Will turn up blue during the provide the blue you need. And it's a particular type of blue, interestingly. It's around sky blue color,
mm,
what's called 480 nanometer blue,
mhm.
which is there's a range of colors of the spectrum from 380 down in the violet to 780 up in the deep red. Um, and this is 480 blue, that particular color. Uh, that color is what's detected by these receptors in the eyes that refers, and then that sends the signal back into the suprachiasmatic nucleus. That's the biological clock in the brain. And that in turn is a master clock for cells in all throughout the body. So there are clocks all throughout the body. There's not just one clock. But
Mhm.
most cells or most tissues, organs in the body have their own clocks. And keeping them all in sync is important. It's not just being in sync with the outside world, but keeping your internal synchrony going. Because when you don't, that's when illness happens. That's when
Mhm.
people feel fatigue, malaise, don't feel well, feel jet lagged type of symptoms. When you mix those things up
Yeah,
and get the body running at, on different clocks or in different time zones, as it were.
yeah.
So all of that is important. And that internal signaling is done by hormones such as melatonin at night and cortisol in the
Right.
morning, in the pre-dawn hours, just before dawn. Those signals are really key in sending messages to the cells of the body. They tell the body what time of day it is, the cells of the body.
Yeah.
So getting that all working in step is pretty critical. But you don't have to worry about that if you can provide sort of control the light you see, so at least it resembles what Mother Nature gives you
Mhm.
um, naturally. It's really a question of getting back to Mother Nature as opposed to living in this twilight world,
Yeah,
night and day, that we do with our electric lights.
absolutely. And I'm so curious. I've heard this before from other people, but some people being more sensitive to blue light than others. And I've heard, but I'd love to talk to an actual scientist about this, that women on the whole are a lot more sensitive to the blue light than men are, which is why I think the women, I have this visceral reaction if my husband turns on an overhead light at night. He seems completely unbothered um, by the whole thing. So is there actual data and research that shows that women are a little bit more sensitive to blue, or did I just make
No,
that
no,
up?
I think there is some evidence, but I'm not certain how strong it is. I mean,
Mm,
there's a big variation between people
mm,
um, and sensitivities. There are some differences, but also the variation is so large, there's a big overlap. So you
mm,
can't say, I'm a woman, I have this clock, and you're a woman and you have this clock, and I'm a man and have that clock. It's not quite as simple as that, but
right.
it's certainly one of the parameters. I think also the endocrine systems are really
Different.
disrupted. I mean, one specific thing in women is one of the things we've seen is the age of menarche,
Hmm.
where young girls have their first period. That used to be 17, 18 years of age
Yeah.
back in the Victorian era.
Yeah.
Now it's down at 12 or 13, and
I'm
some
seeing some
girls
kids
are
with
having
like
it at 9
nine
and
years
10,
old. Yeah.
9 years old.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of that is related to light exposure, I'm sure.
Mm.
In fact, when they are breeding horses these days, and you've got these very high value horses, breeding race horses, they control the precise amount of blue light they see and how much of it in a day they see that changes their cycles. And when they become, ready to ovulate and ready to have their foals. Um, uh, so all of that is controlled by just the precise use of, and in other animal species, it's used in farms to control the timing of growth and
Mm.
reproduction and everything else. So yeah, it's a big effect, and we're not immune to that. We are
Mm.
very much part of
Oh yeah.
nature, even though we surround ourselves with these protective, air conditioned, and regulated environments. We really still have the basic functioning that we inherited from our ancestors for 10,000 generations,
Before the light
living
bulb
on,
was
on the
invented.
surface of the earth.
Right. Yeah, that was what got me actually into all of this, was trying to have a baby, and having, unexplained infertility was a diagnosis. And I was trying everything that the, functional medicine doctors, I'd given up on the regular doctors and their methods, and I was going to the alternative route, and that wasn't working. And so I kind of started diving into some of this research around light. And I said, well, what do I have to lose by going outside in the morning and wearing blue blockers? Like, what
Right,
do I have to lose by doing that? And lo and behold, it was absolutely instrumental in, getting pregnant. Now my son is, 20 months old and thriving and doing really well. And I'm just turned 45 on Tuesday. So
wow. You
it's
waited a
not
while.
just.
You had to wait a long time for that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's not just me though. I mean, I've got one woman in my group right now is 47 and pregnant with a healthy baby, and
Wow.
had the anatomy scan. Everything's great. I've got several women, um,
Wow.
in my group now that had unexplained infertility as a diagnosis, and we are just really implementing the simplicity of circadian biology, throwing a little quantum biology
Right.
in there as well, and some nutrition uh, protocols, and they're, you know thriving. And it's really remarkable, because I think we've been kind of just brainwashed to believe that it has to be complicated and we need a lot of medical interventions.
Right.
And not to say we should totally discard that completely,
Right.
but for a lot of people, I think that they're completely missing the mark on health by ignoring this very simple piece of the equation, quite
Right.
honestly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the effects on weight, we talked about
Oh, on
diet
weight.
and
Yes.
and
Hmm.
obesity.
Yes.
It really helps control that because people just do gain weight when they're
Oh yeah.
see the wrong light, the blue light in the evenings.
Oh yeah.
I think that's part of it. I think we're seeing people on Ozempic now starting to get pregnant,
Hmm.
more commonly, which is an
Hmm.
interesting thing. That's a weight gain, but weight loss thing by itself.
Hmm.
But why would you want to go to Ozempic to avoid your diabetes and avoid your obesity? Because and pay $600 or $800 a month, you
Right.
know, spend the money on some light bulbs, and that's that, could
Yeah.
actually fix the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot more. It's simple, and it's a lot. We don't know, a lot of long-term side effects of some of these interventions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's always a negative side effect, no matter how quote unquote safe something is said to be, whenever you're changing your biochemistry by putting something in. We think we know everything about the human body, but I feel like we really only know just a little tiny bit. And this whole light
Yeah.
story, um proves that, that we think that we're so smart with our modern inventions and our energy efficient windows and energy efficient lighting. And we're actually creating more health issues with those things.
Yeah, no, I think that's correct. And what we're doing when we look at lighting, and we're restoring the fundamental parts of light that are, essential to our health. In other words, we're not doing anything. We're just replicating what Mother Nature used to give us, for, 10,000 generations of our ancestors. And
Mm-hmm.
we're now, recognizing that, gosh, and we're doing a pretty awful job out in the environment too with this, as we
Oh
put
yeah.
more and more lighting in. I mean, one of the striking things that's going on in the outdoor world, just to talk a moment about that,
Mm.
is this huge effects on wildlife, on flora and plants
Mm.
and animals and birds, huge effects. So that the populations of birds are, dropping by 90% or more in many cases,
Wow.
as you put in more electrification
Wow.
lights. And what are people doing with the LED? One of the things people said, well, now at least we can provide outdoor lights that are, low in energy. We're going to save all this electricity. Well, people are just putting more and more outdoor lights
Oh yeah.
to decorate their yards and gardens and
Oh
wherever
yeah.
they're doing.
It's a
Um,
nightmare. I
and
just
it's a
had somebody
nightmare. So
move in next
it's a
door
broad
that
picture.
did
And of
that.
course, we can, our own, I mean, we have the right in our own homes to
Mhm.
decide what um, bugs and animals we have in our homes.
Oh,
We don't want to have flies flying around our homes or
I have
cockroaches or anything
I
else.
have UV
We're
bug
allowed to do
zappers.
that. But
Yeah.
outside, you're messing with, 8.7 million other species, um, enormous number of other species.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, living in a city environment, you really do wonder. And people, I feel like the street lights have gotten even brighter and brighter as just in the last few years, I've noticed it. And it's kind of jarring when you go
Right.
out. I wear my blue blockers outside if I have to go do something outside and it's past dark, because we have the street lights, and then this neighbor moved in and put up all these lights around his entire backyard that he never turns off. And then he has a pool that changes from blue to green to yellow. It like changes colors all night. And it's just like,
Oh,
oh, it's terrible. It's so terrible. I'm like, oh my gosh, why? But you wonder, what is that doing to the ecosystem? Like you mentioned, we think we're so smart, but I feel like certain bugs are here, certain animals are around. Like there's a whole ecosystem that exists for a purpose. And we're disturbing that with these
yeah.
lights. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's the other dimension. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we obviously, most people can't just quit their jobs, leave. Some just takeaways for people, I think, would be looking at your indoor lighting environment and maybe getting rid of those energy efficient bulbs. The bulbs that you have, let's talk about those just a little bit,
Sure.
because that's a big question I get all the time. What bulbs, and why, and
Sure.
how? And so let's just talk a little bit about what you've engineered.
Well, basically, a light bulb is a light bulb, right? And these
Mhm.
are two light bulbs. I think you can see them there, right?
Mhm.
And one of these emits blue rich light nonstop, 24 hours a day, and is therefore very harmful when you use it in the evenings. In the daytime, it's fine.
Mhm.
This one emits no blue light. Um, it emits some violet, which doesn't have any effects on the clock. That
Mm.
makes it whiter. It also emits the other colors, so you get a usable light. But the average person has no way of telling the difference between these lights.
Mm.
So I've got a website called circadianlight.org, and that is set up so that you can look at where the sources are of lights like this. You can also, the light fixtures as well, um, that are automatically regulating between day and night. Um, and so, yes, those lights are becoming more and more of them becoming available in the market.
Mm.
Um, and so I've tried to set up and also my book is pointing to, where my book, The Light Doctor, is pointing to where you can get these lights.
Mm.
And that is, as I say, I'm going to constantly be updating that as more and more things become available on the website. So if you're pretty safe, if you lights that are there are lights that are more yellow orange type lights, and or even red lights. But you can have lights if you need to get have fairly normal vision and color rendering,
Mm-hmm.
and that you expect out of a regular light bulb. You've got lights that also do that too now, and have the circadian benefit.
Yeah, I think that was my husband's biggest complaint when I used to use light bulbs in the night, or in the evening more so, is that he would get so angry because he could never tell like what color his socks actually were. He would end up with a navy sock and a black sock. He said, these stupid light bulbs that you have, because I'd buy like the nursery light bulbs that were just kind of this amber glow, and I put them all around the house.
Yeah.
And he was very upset about that. And I get
All
those
right.
complaints a lot
Well, we try
from,
to solve the practical problem too,
yeah.
and make your husband's life easier as well as without compromise.
I'll have to get some for our bathroom because he just refuses to not turn that huge light on in the
Yeah.
night. I'm like, oh, don't do it, stop. So we'll have to be getting some of those for him. But yeah, I'm excited for people to hear this. Is there anything I didn't ask you about, or a topic that you think just my particular audience in particular would really find compelling about this, that maybe we left out of the conversation, this whole topic
Yeah,
of
yeah. I
light
think
and health?
the time you see light is quite critical during the day.
Mm-hmm.
And there's pretty good evidence that you want to see light, especially in the morning
Mm-hmm.
hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's some very good research now showing that people who've got anxiety, depression, and other medical issues, psychological, psychiatric issues, get better so much faster if they're in rooms facing east and south in a
Yes.
hospital, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to rooms facing north and west. Now they're still getting light coming in, daylight coming in,
Mm-hmm.
but that north facing window isn't doing you much good. And these are people who are not able to get outside.
Or open a
Even better,
window.
but the time you want to get outside is in the morning hours. That
Mm-hmm.
clearly is beneficial. So if you get your walk in the mornings, or your
Yes.
run, or whatever you do outside in the mornings, that your pickleball or your tennis game or whatever else you try to do, try to fit your schedule around that. These days with people working virtually more, you can actually have more flexibility in
Oh
terms of
yeah.
how you design your day than you could in
Yes.
the old days, where everyone had to go and commute at the same time and come home at the same time. So a little bit easier to do. But that's, I think, the time of that light in the morning is critical. I think that's
Mm.
one thing.
Yeah.
Um, and regularity is very important. The big
Mm.
thing is keep on a regular schedule. So people who are highly erratic in terms of when they sleep and when they're up and wake, they have more health problems and don't live as long as people who are on a pretty regular schedule. Maybe more boring, I guess, for the party animals amongst us. But basically, yeah, try to keep it on a pretty regular schedule.
And would you say going to bed earlier is always going to be a health benefit for most people because of the impact of human growth hormone releasing at specific times? Or
I
what?
think that depends on your own physiological nature, because I think you've got to find the pattern that enables you to get a stable pattern. The most important is stable time, right? In
Mm,
other words, it
mm,
doesn't really matter whether you go to bed at 10 and wake at 5, or you go to bed at 11 and wake at 6, or whatever it is. That doesn't matter too much as long as it's stable and regular. Um, I think that is it's that regularity of pattern that's really critical. The other thing, sleep. There is this statement about everyone needs 8 hours. That's a bit of an
yeah.
exaggeration. Um,
Yeah.
the variation, but normal sleep is between 6.5, 8 to 8 hours, somewhere in that range.
Mhm.
But some people need 9, and they should get 9 if they need 9.
Yeah.
Some people, but if you're sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night, that is a problem.
That's a
You're
problem.
undoubtedly
Definitely.
sleep deprived.
I
But
agree.
But basically, if you actually look at, again, a very interesting thing, lifespan, the people who sleep 7 hours live the longest compared to those that sleep 6 or 8, which is
Interesting.
kind of interesting.
Very interesting. So 7 hours is the sweet spot for in the research by
Yeah, in the research data. Now,
Yeah.
as I say,
Yeah.
individual variations, but
Yeah.
these studies are based on very large populations, some of them. The Biobank study in England, where they looked at people and their light exposure and their sleep patterns and everything, and then tracked them for 7 to 10 years thereafter, they had 88,000 people in there, huge things. And they did the genetics of this as well. So just enormous amount of information now in these studies, and they're pretty robust in terms of these effects. And we're able to show it's not just sort of small studies anymore that show these effects.
Fantastic. One other question I just came up with now that we're talking about these like sleep wake cycles, because I have, so many people coming out of the woodwork now. Whenever I start talking about light and dark cycles and the impact of health, I will get the people that are in Scandinavia and Iceland and Alaska and some of these places in the summer where the sun doesn't set, some places at all for a few days. Some places the sun doesn't go down until midnight and the sun is up at 3, 4 in the morning. Obviously, it's going to be really important for those people to get blackout curtains. But would you say for those people, it's equally as important that they're just kind of following this is what the advice I always give them? I'd love to hear your opinion on this is set a consistent sleep wake cycle, try to get 7 hours of sleep per night or more if you need it. If you're tired, sleep, try to go to bed a little bit earlier. And that's the best you can do is just really try to be consistent with those sleep wake times, because you're going to have to go to bed and you're going to have to sleep when it's still light outside.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. You have to be able to control light, dark exposure. What's coming into your eyes, it matters. And so you can do it with blindfolds. You can do it with blackened rooms. And so, yes, you've got in Europe, there's a very nice blackout blinds automatically. And sometimes people have in their houses that can totally make it dark. But yes, it's the schedule, a consistent schedule, because if you're getting, erratic exposure to light, or your lights come streaming in through the windows, that's highly disruptive, and it has, big health effects.
Yeah.
So regularity and contrast are the key. The contrast of light between darkness of night and brightness of day, and the regularity meaning the same time. Those are really some of the most fundamental bits of advice that you can do to safeguard your health.
Yeah, I agree. Well, wonderful. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I'm definitely going to have all of the links that we talked about in the show notes for everyone. If someone's just driving, if you, listening, would you mind just repeating the website where they can find the information about maybe your book and the light bulbs?
Yeah, the book is called The Light Doctor. It's available on Amazon for pre-order right now. By July 1, it will be on order. I've got a special deal on Amazon, so if you order it before July 1st, you can get 33% off. And so I advise people to pre-order if they can. But the book is out there and available. It will also be available in bookstores and elsewhere. So we try to make it broadly available. The website for the book is called thelightdoctor.com. And I've got another website called circadianlight.org, which is the information site to keep up to date as to where the products are, whether it's lamps and light bulbs and fixtures and eyewear and the like, where you can find those.
Fantastic. Well, I'll make sure we have all of those in the show notes. And it's been a pleasure to have you back for a second show. And I'm sure we'll be talking sometime in the future. Thanks again for being here.
Good. Well, thank you, Sarah. It's been a great conversation. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening to the Evolving Wellness Podcast. Just a quick little reminder, this is not medical advice nor meant to be taken as a substitute for working one-on-one with a healthcare practitioner. And if you enjoy the show, please head on over to Apple or Spotify to leave the show up to a 5-star review. If you're over on YouTube, please leave us a like, leave us a comment. I really appreciate you for being here, for listening to the show, and your support means the world to me as I continue to try to pull guests from around the world to bring you informative content to empower you to make decisions about your own health. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.